We're all dealing with feeling. We're all coping with feeling. Looking inside your heart is the place that you should start. Then you can heal. Then you can be real. So open up your heart. It's time to start. Dealing with feeling. Coping with feeling. Open up your heart. It's time to start.
Okay.
Welcome to my channel, Dealing with Feelings, and today I have a guest, Judy Harmon Holmes, and she is the author of the book Responsible Kids: 6 Steps to Creating Them in an Irresponsible World. Thank you for coming today, Judy. And
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I would like to share with you some insights that I got from reading your book. And I want to reread it because it's really a good book. I saw in the book, you talk a little bit about letting your kids suffer the consequences of their mistakes. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things that we tend to do is to threaten our children and say, if you don't do this, then this is what's going to happen. And pretty soon it becomes a broken record and our kids don't pay any attention to it. So in real life, there are consequences to every decision that we make. And so if we have consequences in place that are logical or natural consequences, then it helps children to realize that there are boundaries in the world, that there are consequences for their decisions, and helps them to feel secure.
That's really helpful. And I noticed your book is geared toward parenting of older kids. And some of the work that I do is geared toward parenting of younger kids. But I think there's a really interesting intersection here. So I want to share with you a book that I wrote about anxiety. Now, before we go into it, do you think children who do not have boundaries and consequences might feel more anxiety?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they don't feel as safe. And children want to know the rules. And if young children, that's what they depend on. That's the rule, and that's why we obey it. And it makes them feel good.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's see what happened to our friend Cal and Ben. Can you see this screen okay?
Sure can.
Okay, so here's Cal. And if I can. And he's going, there's Ben, and they're going into the store with their moms. And they see each other. They're friends, obviously, in school. And this is the most important thing. Here's a parent telling the rules, right? Ben's mom said, "You need to stay with us." Cal's mom said, "Yes, do not go far." And of course, they didn't stay with their moms. And I think a lot of parents have had this experience. So Cal said, "Oh no, my mom is not there. Where can I go? Oh no, I cannot see my mom. I do not like that. I feel anxious. I want to go to my mom." And so they get anxious, and what do? They say, "Mom, mom, mom." And then finally the moms pop out and say, "I'm here." And this is based on a true story. When I went to the Mile High Campground, I got inspiration from this for this story from a mother who was talking to me about her daughter. They were camping there and they were down in Cherokee, and their daughter wandered off. And what she did was she hid behind the sweaters and let her daughter cope with getting lost because she didn't follow directions and stay with them. So here they are. And she's saying, I told you to stay with us. And they're sorry. So these are some questions about feeling anxiety. So what do you
Could I
think?
make a comment before we look at the questions?
Yeah.
I think that experience in your book is just so valuable because, number one, the parents were there and knew that their children were safe, but they allowed them to feel the anxiety, to feel the worry, and to have work through it and know that they didn't want to do that again because it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Whereas a punishment wouldn't have accomplished that. This was real.
And my daughter is 18 right now, and I shouldn't be talking about this, putting this on the internet. But anyway, we have to do some of that now, even. It's not on this level, but I think, in your book is more geared to the older crowd, but it's still the same. This is sort of a metaphor to what all parents need to do always.
Always.
And that
And
is,
excuse me.
it's giving the space, right?
Yes. Yes. And it's not always easy to let your children suffer the natural consequences of their behavior. Sometimes we have to look at what are logical consequences and have those in place before something comes up. For example, if a child doesn't come home when they say they're going to come home, what are natural or logical consequences that would follow that, rather than grounding them or something that's totally unrelated? This experience was real. It's a wonderful experience.
I don't think they'll ever wander off like that again.
No, because they didn't like the feeling.
Yeah. So it's a really good example. And in your book, you talk about consequences too, and standing firm.
Yeah.
Once you have those consequences, I'm trying to teach them how to do it themselves, you say on page 37. Through practicing activities parents plan, children learn how to take care of themselves.
And this is what we want them to do. By the time they go to college or off to a job in their own apartment, they're only 18 years old. Some are only 17 years old. And we want them already to have learned ways to take care of themselves and make wise choices. And if we're doing it for them and we're not allowing them to suffer consequences of poor choices, whether it's not studying or whether it's not coming in on time or whatever choice they make that's not a good one, if we don't allow them to suffer that consequence, then they have a lot more difficulty when they get out on their own, which is so soon.
Yeah.
So soon. And then there's nobody there to help them deal with those consequences. That's the biggest thing. When they're little and when they grow up, we're right there to help them deal with the consequences.
And I think, my husband's a mental health counselor, and he always talks about how sometimes he has college students here at UF. Sometimes there's still, parents are still involved. They call those helicopter parents. And
Yes.
it makes it more work. But I do think it's a logical process, no matter where you step into this on the spectrum, whether it's when they're 3 and wandering around the store, or when they're 18, 19, 20 even, you can still think about this.
Yes. Yes, very definitely. Very important. My middle daughter borrowed my car when I had asked her not to. This was my brand new car. And I don't know if you remember this one from the book, but she went to back out of the driveway and she put it in drive instead of reverse, and she went through the garage door. And so when I came home from my day trip that I was on, I found my brand new car messed, completely demolished on the front, and my garage door broken. And her response, and her wisdom of 17 years, well, Mom, that's why we have insurance. And so this was, as mad as I was, as upset as I was, I just told her we had to discuss this later. But then she, we did discuss it, and she learned that it was quite expensive to try to pay back the deductible on the insurance. And she learned that when you have an accident with your insurance, it generally will go up. And so she spent, actually, this was very difficult for her dad and me, but she spent one whole year from her part-time job putting away money to pay off that deductible. And there were so many times during the year that we said, well, maybe she's learned her lesson. It's been 3 months. She's been putting this money away. We can afford to pay the rest of it. And then we didn't let ourselves do that. And it was the best learning experience that I think she ever had.
Wow.
She did pay it off. She paid every bit of it. And it was just as difficult for us as it was for her.
The part I really like about that story is where and I think we need to do another video is how you stopped and you said, let's talk about it later.
Oh, I was so mad.
Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of parents, myself included, I don't stop, breathe, wait, and think. And there's my next book I'm writing right now is highlighting those 4 steps.
Yes. So important.
And so if we can do that, I would love it if we could meet again.
And children learn that too from the modeling that they see around them. If they see their parents doing that very thing, if they see their teachers and other people in their world doing that kind of thing, and then being able to put off discussing things when they're angry and wait till they can cool down and come back together, and makes all the difference in the world. But whatever we're teaching our children, we have to model it as well.
Yeah. And I don't think anyone's perfect with any of this. So we just have to work like this book, your book, gives people a little blueprint that you can, practice. And I don't think any parent is ever going to be perfect in the way they look, the way they build their relationship with their child. It's a blueprint. And I think it's really helpful. But
excuse me, go ahead.
But we need to really be just look at this as a blueprint.
Yes, I like that word, blueprint. It is. And the whole thing is a process. Teaching everything to our children is a process. It isn't something that we tell them and they know it. It's over and over and over, because that's how we learn. That's how the brain learns.
Yeah. So you want to go to the next set of questions?
Sure.
Okay, let's see here. Well, I just want to tell you about these questions. These questions, we don't have to answer all of them, but these are the questions at the end of the story. So the concept of this book that I have is modeling, just like you were talking about, modeling good ways to cope with the feeling and to build emotional literacy so that children can use these words to express their feelings. And the main question in these lists of questions, that I think it would be good to talk about is the last two. What is the best way to get help from an adult if you are lost? And how do you get help when you are anxious? Because as a professional, I think you might have something to say about those two questions.
As a professional, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
As
the
a
last.
you're a professional counselor, right? So, you know, sometimes if a child is in a store like that, you might not, there's some adults you want to ask for help and some you don't.
Exactly, exactly. And it depends on the store that you're in too. If you're in a grocery store, as your people were in your story, we could teach our children to go to the cashier and
Yeah.
ask the checkout person to help you find your parent.
And some children do deal with anxiety and have mental health issues, and sometimes they do need professional help to get
Absolutely.
help, and it's okay to go to counseling.
Oh, yes, yes. And one of the things parents can do, the most important thing parents can do to help children recognize their feelings is to identify them. And when a child is upset about something, rather than saying things like, oh, well, you'll get over this, or this is nothing, don't worry about it, just identify the feeling. I can see that you're really upset about this. I can see you're very worried. Whatever the feeling is, so that children come to recognize those feelings. And then we need to do this with little boys particularly. We need to do it with both, but little boys seem to have a much more difficult time recognizing how they're feeling. And so it's doubly important that we identify that for boys. But
Yeah,
that
I think
doesn't.
a lot of times society gives them the message that they're supposed to man up or
Absolutely, absolutely.
stand up straight, don't be a crybaby or whatever. And girls don't get that message.
Right. Yes, girls are allowed to cry and be upset about things.
And
And
hopefully will change.
yes, yes. And we have to stop denying when little children fall and they hurt themselves. If we see that it's not a big hurt, generally we'll say, oh, that's nothing. That's just a scratch. Just go back out there and play. And that isn't what they need. They need to be told, oh, I can see that must be stinging, or that must be very uncomfortable. And what happens is almost like magic, because the more we allow them to have their feelings, the quicker they get over it. It's very interesting how that happens. If you ever think of a little kid who's fallen and they've got a Band-Aid and they start telling the story to everybody they come in contact with. Oh, I fell and here's my Band-Aid and I fell, and he goes on and tells the whole story. And then the next person gets a little less of the story, and the next person. And actually, by the time they've told the story to 2 or 3 people who have recognized their feelings, they're saying, oh, that was nothing.
Yeah, I always say, if you want to cope with the feeling, just wait. If it's really bothering you, just wait a while and it will go away on its
Yes.
own. And when I was a teacher, that's thing about the hurts and things like that. Let's say I had a story time and like, oh no, I was looking at my watch. I have 5 more minutes to fill or something. I would say to the kids, has anyone here ever skinned your knee? Raise your hand. And everyone has a story. And that would always fill the time because they're fascinated with telling their story.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
We have to let them do that. As parents, we have to let them tell their stories, and we have to listen and verify their feelings. That's the most important thing.
yeah. And some of us haven't had the experience of having parents that did that for us.
Most of us.
So it's really it's hardwired in us not to do that because of our experience. So we have to rewire ourselves, I think.
Yes. Yes.
And that's
And
what this book helps us do that.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a really great book. I really highly recommend it. And I'm going to put at the end of, I'm going to stop share here. At the end of the YouTube video, I'm going to put your information. Do you have anything else that you want to put up on the screen? Once I do the editing, I'll put.
This is actually the first book that I've written. I've written articles, mostly research articles and that sort of thing as a college professor, but this was the first book I've written for everybody.
So you
So-
have, but you have a blog.
I have a blog and a web page. The web page is creatingresponsiblekids.com. And then there's a little extra title that says information and support for teachers and parents.
Wonderful. So you're giving out some free information for people to cope with parenting. And
Yes.
I think your blog does that as well. And
Yes.
so I think I'll put that here on this spread here. And are you working on another project?
I am. I'm working on another book. And I teach a course at Flagler entitled Mindful Communication. And the rest of that title is Listening, Responding, and Sticking Up for Yourself. And
Wow,
that's
sounds like a class I would like to take.
And my book, excuse me, my book has the same title. The one I'm working on.
Wow. Well, I look forward, if you want any, I look forward to reading it if you want any second readers.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
I
So
would
far,
love
I
to.
have chapters 1 and 2 in their rough draft and the outline of the book, and that's as far as I've gone.
Wonderful. Well, we need it. I'm sure as you teach the class, you'll be getting more narrative will come to you.
Yes, yes. And I used to teach the class on Zoom. It's with lifelong learning, actually. And I used to teach it on Zoom, but this semester I'm teaching it in person.
Oh, well, let me know if you're teaching it in Zoom.
I will.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think we had a wonderful
Healing,
conversation.
feeling,
Thank you for
healing,
my channel.
feeling,
And I'm gonna
healing.